Okay, sorry. Like we're having some technical difficulties. Hopefully everyone can still hear. This is Good, the Bad, the Ugly of Project Cost Data with Hard Dollar. Bridging the Gaps. I'm joined, this is Jeffrey Nesbitt. I'm joined by IMS, David Briggs, and B4 Consulting, Juan Moore. Gentlemen, thanks for joining. I was mentioning earlier that there's three of us, and we have the title The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So I guess we'll let the staff decide who's who today for us. So I want to go ahead and turn it over to David Briggs here so he can go through and introduce IMS as well as Juan Moore with B4 Consulting. David?
Thanks, Jeffrey. I appreciate that. So this is David Briggs, Vice President at Innovative Management Solutions. We offer Primavera. We are experts in Primavera solutions and implementation, and provide also hosting solutions for both the Primavera products as well as Hard Dollar and SAP.
You're all set. We just heard Okay. Thank you, David.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Juan, why don't you introduce yourself and your team over at B4?
Okay, there I am. I am unmuted. Thank you, Jeffrey. Once again, Juan Moore. I'm with B4 Consulting, the engineering construction industry principal. B4 was established in 1996 as a SAP business management consultancy. We are here in North America and Europe, and headquartered on the East Coast in the greater Boston area. We actually are a 100% SAP-centric consulting firm, and we resell and implement SAP's suite of tools that include the ERP system along with reporting analytics and mobility products. And we specialize and have solution architects in the areas of field services, engineering, construction, real estate, and heavy equipment management. And that is B4.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Juan. Appreciate it, David. Thank you as well. Today we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly in project data and how Hard Dollar addresses that. Hard Dollar has been in business now for 22 plus years. We've got users around the globe managing their projects, making us one of the fastest growing companies in the United States. And the reason is we're one of the fastest growing companies is we're serving very distinct markets. And in these markets of oil and gas, mining, infrastructure, utilities, environmental shutdown, turnaround type organizations, we are addressing problems that they're having today. And those problems are the things that we're here to talk about, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and bridging those gaps. The things that we've helped our customers do is build cost model estimates. Not only build cost model estimates, but build cost model estimates that we have got the confidence in with the accuracy and number that once we win the job, we are actually not going to lose money. We'll talk about how that works. We help our customers measure progress, the execution phase of a job, where we've won the job and we're measuring progress back against our estimate. And from doing that and closing that gap, we're able to help forecast completion while centralizing project cost and productivity. How do we do that for our customers? It's really the unification of systems of record. Whether you're an owner, engineer, or contractor, there's really 5 key systems that happen on a project from start to finish. We may be looking at a design takeoff where we're building up a bill of materials or quantities. We want to bring that in and we want to start creating our estimate or our scope of work. Once we create our scope of work, we've applied our labor, resources, whatever is important to us as an organization, we typically schedule that out in a tool like Primavera so we can manage the job. Once we're managing the job, of course, we're going to be tracking actuals against that. That's progress measurement. And we may be getting actuals from the field, from a Primavera, from time cards, or from an SAP where we're bringing in the actuals. The problem is there's dependent connections that happen between these two, all these organizations or these key systems and elements. And today, that is the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a gap there, and That's what Hard Dollar proposes to solve for you guys today, is helping with those dependent connections, bridging the gap. So when there's a WBS change in your scope, there's an impact to earned value. Understanding and realizing that when we update schedules, cash flows can have some implications. Any price update from our vendor master library and finance. These are all gaps that need to be closed if we want to have true visibility into cost and productivity in our organization. When you don't have a unified system of record, things break. Lots of things can break, but for purpose of time today, we're going to focus in on cash flow, project reconciliation, historical project references, and activity performance measurement, or project controls. That's the execution phase of our job. So when we start to look at cash flow, how often are we doing cash flow? Would we like to do cash flow more often? When we are doing it today and there's gaps between the systems, we're finding organizations are telling us, you know, we're getting to cash flow, but it's a very time-consuming process, and it's a manual process today. And quite honestly, they say, we're not so sure on the accuracy of those numbers because it is a manual process. So when we start to talk about unification and bridging the gap, we're talking about tying scope and schedule together in a real-time environment, sharing start and finish dates. Maybe it's resources, it's costs, it's crews, but being able to quickly and accurately forecast where you're in the job, where you're going, and when you're going to get there, giving you that visibility, and more importantly, the confidence in that visibility so you can manage your project to succession. When we start talking about project reconciliation, it really can mean a lot of things to a lot of organization and what's broken. And the disconnect that we see in the gap is really between your ERP, your estimate, and your schedule. On the scheduling side, or on the scope and build-up estimating side, we may be doing things at a very detailed level. We've been looking at things at an activity phase or item level. But over in our SAP solution and our ERP package, we may be looking things at a general ledger level or account code level, rolling things up. So bridging that gap to allow the individuals in the organization manage their business the way they need to manage it successfully without compromising your ERP package. So we need to be able to roll up or roll down accordingly to be able to manage that project and start to earn our actuals and earn value management. One of the things that's going to help bridge that gap between the financial system is talking about as-built. So when we start talking about our historical project references, we are talking about bringing over what I would call actuals. We may be tracking actuals in the field, we may manually forecast it today, but over in SAP, the actuals are happening, bills are being paid, invoices are happening, purchase orders are going on. So being able to bring and share that information, close that gap back into your estimating tool is going to allow you on your next estimate to start to refine and define exactly what is the cost. So as we're moving forward as an organization, we're getting tighter and tighter controls. If we want to look at something like install RC pipe, we have the ability, as you can see, to bring in the actuals. And on the right-hand side, you can see we're bringing in over actual production rates. So we're getting a clear understanding as an organization to do this activity, how many days, shift, hours, whatever's important to us. We now have that ability to start benchmarking that at an activity level as opposed to an account code level. And that's on the operational side, that's extremely important to understand where it is as built, how did we estimate it, what are we averaging. Moving our organization forward, closing the gap between the divisions so we can all have more visibility into cost and productivity. The same thing can be said for, you know, the execution phase of a job. We call it activity performance measurement, project controls, or progress measurement. Call it what you want. It's tracking what's really happening out there in the field today. Life is happening. It's happening now. How can we capture and get some eyes and visibility into what's going on? We can do that by closing the gap between our financial system and our scheduling and estimating package. We can look at things like man-hours per cubic yard, equipment hours per feet. What was the unit productivity for a single activity or multiple activities? Whatever's important to you as an organization, it gives you the ability to show what is planned, what is expanded, where are we going. It's the understanding at every phase, at every step, real numbers in a real-time environment. You can do that when you start to leverage productivity data into adjacent systems of record. Sort of rounding out, one of the big buckets in our unification is really scheduling integration with Primavera. It's the leading tool in the marketplace that customers like yourself that we see, as well as SAP. So how do we bridge the gap? It's really scheduling live integration, and this is important to everybody. We're seeing it on the owners, the engineers, and contractor side. We are addressing huge challenges that are happening out there today, which is the manual entry. It's a time-consuming process to keep the estimate and schedule in sync. Then it becomes even more time-consuming to process and understand what are the cost impacts of a schedule change. So what we're talking about is real, live, two-way integration, cost and resource loading schedules. And when you bridge that gap, it gives you a unique ability to start to do some what-if scenarios. And what I mean by that is what is the cost impact in my scope when I change a duration up or down? We saw that productivity earlier. We understand what our productivity is because we have brought that in from our financial system. So if we expedite or expand out a schedule change, we know, can this be done or not? Do we need to add additional resources, equipment, labor, extra shifts, whatever? But it gives us the ability to make an educated decision based on reality, and that's something that we're not getting today. So when we close that gap, we're going to get that real connectivity in real time between scope and cost, and providing immediate insight into impacts of schedule changes as well as time-phase reporting. And talking about time-phase reporting and scheduling is going to be David Briggs with IMS, talking a little bit further about what are some of the benefits of sharing the information and closing the gap between these two applications. David?
Thanks, Jeffrey. So as Jeffrey pointed out, is the ability to close that gap between the cost estimation and the schedule is very critical in terms of the sharing of the information and the impact on the schedule back to the estimate. The connection between hard dollar and P6 is really, truly a dynamic two-way integration that brings together the components of the project cost data into the schedule. We can actually take the information out of the hard dollar solution and then import that into Primavera to help create our initial schedule and then create the Gantt chart that everybody is very familiar with in Primavera. And this can actually come out of the hard dollar software to drive the schedule in Primavera, where you could then go and create the appropriate links in your schedule and durations in P6. Once this is done, this can then actually, as a two-way integration would occur, you can actually take that data back out of Primavera, back into hard dollar, so that now hard dollar will actually have information from the schedule included into it, such as the durations and then also the cost estimates that have already been placed in it. Within our schedule then, we can do the what-ifs, as Jeffrey's pointed out. We can then grow durations on the schedule. And because of the two-way integration between Primavera and hard dollar, we can quickly see what is the impact on our overall estimate if a duration grows. If we add additional resources to bring in a schedule, what is the impact on the estimate? And drive that data back into hard dollar. So from that, if we move forward, you can see the cost model that we can actually generate from the information that will be passed over to hard dollar. Thank you. So with this, now this is actually the data that would come from T6, whereby we've enabled this link between hard dollar and T6. We can see what the planned cost was, which could come out of the hard dollar system, and then what the actual cost is as well, based on what T6 is scheduling and showing what that cost would be. And again, this information, as we make adjustments into T6, can be passed back to hard dollar. Also very important is within hard dollar, as we make updates in there, that data again can be passed back over to T6. So it's truly a real-time integration and connection between the cost estimation tool and reporting tool back into T6, something that typically is not there in most systems. Jeffrey, back to you. Juan, at this point, I believe this would be back into you to discuss.
Yes, I can go ahead and discuss this slide. So thanks, David. So one of the things that we're looking at from an SAP viewpoint and bridging the gap that we see with a lot of clients between estimating and what we'd call project execution is really the complete life cycle. And one of the things that we've started to do is to really look at and generate the architecture for how SAP and hard dollar would communicate and share data seamlessly. And we look at things like material masters, vendor masters, and all the way down, and you can see the items here. And so we've actually started to build out and look at and understand all of those things that we think are what would be normally those manual processes and gaps in between SAP and hard dollar as an estimating system, and work to bridge those gaps. As we looked at that, that is the area that we've begun to really concentrate on as an organization and work with hard dollar, is to really look at SAP and look at hard dollar and figure out where those areas are. And a couple of the big items from a why would you look at SAP and hard dollar is that we've actually already started working on and understand how to take the CBS structure and the dates within hard dollar and actually bring those into SAP and not duplicate that effort that usually is fairly massive once you've been awarded a contract and have to go and do the project setup piece. The next is really taking that information that was done during the estimating process from a procurement perspective and grab that and let that be the starting point for what was closeout and estimating is now really the beginning part of the full life cycle from a procurement perspective, and taking that information. And then the last two is really receiving the hard dollar estimate and forecast data and bringing that back into SAP so that we can do enterprise level reporting, starting at a project level and moving up the organization all the way to the highest levels of the legal entity structure. And so those are the things that we've already begun to key in on and develop and work with hard dollar from an SAP perspective to start bridging that gap between the two, those two areas within the construction process. And so some of the things that we look at is the SAP vendor and material master, which is where some of that corporate level data is normally managed from a material master, looking at material prices, depending on the different type of material groups that you have, our vendor masters. And we're taking that information and actually bringing that into hard dollar and updating their resource libraries with that information. And we can do that at a detail level or at a higher level if we're not going down to an individual item, but maybe we're doing a material group at a higher level and bringing that in from a pricing perspective and really getting corporate prices and corporate information and bringing that into hard dollar so that when they're beginning estimates, they're working with the most current data that we have in SAP from a corporate perspective. Next slide. And so once we've looked at that piece and we've, in essence, been awarded work from a hard dollar estimate perspective, we're actually taking that CBS structure and generating a WBS structure within SAP. And one of the things that we normally work on and have built is really I'll call it a reconciled cost code or cost account structure that we can marry up between the two systems. And once we've done that, we can actually bring over the budget values as well that came out of the estimate as the awarded work, and basically bring that in by cost type into the SAP side of the house. And so once again, that effort that is normally taken to produce that, now we can make that integrated and seamless. Once we have that actually up and running, one slide back, we can actually take the actuals. If we now have a reconciled structure, we can take actual quantities and actual dollars from SAP and in essence pass those back into hard dollar, so that hard dollar can now do comparisons against what was the original budget, and look at where we are running, and really give them the tools to start looking at and performing some of the forecast analysis that they would normally do on their side of the house to present that back. So now that we've in essence had the SAP actuals around dollars and quantities, pass that back, one of the things that we can do now, next slide, is really take a look at and be able to then look at the functionality within hard dollar from an earned value perspective. And because they now have historical data, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, but they have all this information that they're doing, in essence, an earned value calculation, we can then house that information, especially the percent complete, back into SAP, and basically track our percent completes within SAP as an ERP system that we can use going forward in some of the downstream processes from an ERP perspective. And that's what we're showing here, is where we would actually track that. Once we've done that, and we now have those percent completes from an earned value perspective, and those are now within SAP, we would look at the next step in the process in the next slide. We can now then get the forecast dollars and quantities that are from hard dollar, and we can actually bring those into SAP and load those in by and at the levels at which we now have connected between SAP as our ERP system and hard dollar as our project management system. Now that those structures are linked, we can basically bring those forecasts back into SAP at whatever levels that we have the links built between the hard dollar structure and the SAP structure. And now once we've tied all of that together and we have that information, the next thing that we do is, now that we have that, if we then can bring in pay items from hard dollar, where they're matching up to bid items and getting all of that information done and presenting those pay items, we can then basically run through the invoicing process from an SAP perspective, and then load in not only our percent complete, our forecast, and the amount of truly billed or revenue that we receive. And then SAP has a very powerful revenue recognition cost of sales engine that we then can run through from a true corporate ERP system perspective, and then calculate what is our recognized revenue reserves for imminent loss or what have you, and cost of sales calculations. And that's really, we've looked at those key areas of where those gaps are between from a process perspective, and we've in essence started to bridge those gaps between hard dollar and SAP. We already know where those are, and we've basically done the work to start integrating those from a seamless perspective.
Thanks, Juan. Appreciate it, and David as well. Everyone on the phone, we find ourselves back to project cost management, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and bridging those gaps with hard dollar. One of the things that I want to mention is what we've been talking about today is not just a unique situation that maybe you see in your own organization, but this truly is a trend in the market, in the industry today, where leading organizations such as yourself are now unifying those disparate systems into one project cost management solution using Hard Dollar to bridge that gap from Primavera, SAP, and HD. And when we unify those disconnected data elements, we start to now be able to recognize cash flow with accuracy and visibility. We're now reconciling our projects back against our financial SAP system while we're building up our historic project reference library. So as we continually bridge these gaps, we're moving our organizations and firms further into the future of having tighter controls and visibility and eyeballs on cost and productivity. And that's how we eliminate the bad and the ugly, and we're just left with the good of project cost data and Hard Dollar. We want to thank everyone for your time. We are going to open up to chat. Any questions, we'll unmute. So feel free to go to your webinar chat button, type in any questions you may have for David, Juan, or myself, and we'll be happy to answer those. Or if you're more comfortable, like myself, as opposed to typing, go ahead and get on the phone, and we'll unmute you, and you can ask away. Again, everyone, thank you for your time. We'll be putting up our contact details as well, and sending out this slide deck in audio so you can share throughout your organization. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Monthly. I wanted to thank again David Briggs and Juan Moore with B4 Consulting. Our contact information is up on the screen. Please feel to reach out to us at any time, and we'll be following up with you with this slide deck and audio, again, to share within your organizations. Thank you, and have a great day.